She thought he was just a dusty old farmer, until his hands and a sliver of tinfoil brought her $90,000 car roaring back to life, and her world with it. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The sun beat down on the cracked asphalt of the county road, the heat radiating in shimmering waves that distorted the already featureless horizon. Old Man Hemlock, or Hem, as he was known to the few folks who still bothered with names out here in the dust bowl that was once fertile farmland, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a calloused, earth-stained hand. His ancient pickup truck, a relic from an era when hope still grew alongside the corn, idled with a tubercular cough beside a sleek, silver sports car that looked as out of place in this desolate landscape as a diamond in a coal scuttle. Its hood was up, a silent testament to mechanical distress, and beside it stood a young woman who looked even more distressed than her vehicle. She was a city creature, that much was obvious. Her clothes, those simple, designer jeans, a silk blouse now wilting in the oppressive heat, were clearly expensive, impractical for the gritty reality of this forgotten corner of the world. Her hair, a cascade of sun-kissed blonde, was plastered to her forehead with perspiration, and her perfectly manicured fingernails were already chipped from a futile attempt to diagnose the problem with what looked like a tire iron, an instrument she wielded with more desperation than skill. Hem had seen her car an hour ago, a silver flash speeding down the county road as if pursued by demons. He'd shaken his head then, muttering to himself about city folk and their pointless hurry. Now, on his slow, rattling return trip from the feed store in the nearest town, a dwindling outpost of civilization some 30 miles distant, he found her stranded, a picture of urban fragility against a backdrop of rural decay. He pulled his truck to a halt, the ancient engine protesting with a final, shuddering gasp before falling silent. The quiet that descended was profound, broken only by the buzz of unseen insects and the young woman's increasingly frustrated sighs. He climbed out slowly, his joints creaking in sympathy with his truck. He was a man carved from the unforgiving landscape, his face a road map of sun-etched wrinkles, his eyes the pale, washed-out blue of a drought-stricken sky. He wore faded denim overalls over a threadbare chambray shirt, his boots caked with the dust of 1,000 barren acres. "Trouble, miss?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like stones shifting in a dry riverbed. The young woman jumped, startled by his sudden appearance. She spun around, her eyes wide with a mixture of alarm and a dawning, reluctant hope. "Oh, you startled me," she stammered, her voice a little breathless, betraying the anxiety she was clearly trying to suppress. "Yes, my car just died. 1 minute it was fine, the next nothing. It won't even turn over." She gestured helplessly towards the silent, gleaming engine. Hem nodded slowly, his gaze taking in the complex array of polished chrome and anodyne plastic that constituted a modern car engine. It was a far cry from the simple, honest mechanics of his own ancient truck, which he could usually coax back to life with little more than a length of baling wire and a well-aimed kick. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, his tone polite, though his eyes held a hint of the skepticism old countrymen reserve for newfangled contraptions and city folk in equal measure. The young woman hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking from Hem's weathered face to his ancient, rust-pocked truck, then back to her own disabled marvel of automotive engineering. He could almost hear the calculations going on in her head. Can this relic of a man possibly understand, let alone fix, a machine as sophisticated as this? But then again, what other options do I have out here in the middle of nowhere? "Please," she said finally, a note of weary resignation in her voice. "Be my guest. Though I warn you, the last mechanic who looked at it, back in the city, of course, muttered something about a faulty integrated control module and quoted me a price that could probably buy this entire county." Hem didn't smile, but a flicker of something, amusement, understanding, passed through his pale blue eyes. He shuffled towards the engine, his movements slow, deliberate. He didn't reach for a tool. He simply looked. He listened. He even, to the young woman's surprise, ran a gnarled, earth-stained finger along a cool metal fuel line, his head tilted as if attuning himself to the vehicle's silent distress. This was not the quick, dismissive glance of a city mechanic eager to plug in a diagnostic computer. This was something older, something more intuitive. The young woman watched him, her initial skepticism warring with a growing, reluctant curiosity. There was a quiet competence about this old farmer, a lifetime of practical, hands-on experience etched into every line on his face, every callus on his hands. He might not know the jargon, he might not have the fancy diagnostic tools, but he understood machines. He understood the land. He understood the harsh, unforgiving realities of a world where a broken-down vehicle could mean the difference between survival and something far worse. As the old man continued his silent communion with her recalcitrant engine, the city girl, whose name, though he hadn't asked, was Cassandra Van Deeren, found herself hoping, with an intensity that surprised her, that this dusty, unassuming farmer might just be the unlikely savior she so desperately needed. Her important meeting, the one she had been racing towards, the one that could make or break her fledgling career, was hours away, in a city that now felt like it was on another planet. And she was stranded, alone, at the mercy of a silent, silver beast and the quiet, enigmatic wisdom of Old Man Hemlock. Hem continued his slow, methodical examination of Cassandra Van Deeren's disabled sports car. He didn't poke or prod aggressively. He simply observed, his senses honed by a lifetime of living in close communion with the land and its often uncooperative machinery, absorbing 1,000 subtle details that would have escaped a less patient, less attuned observer. He noted the faint, almost imperceptible scent of burnt insulation near the main wiring harness, a smell so subtle it was almost masked by the lingering fragrance of Cassandra's expensive perfume. He saw the way a tiny droplet of moisture had condensed on a particular sensor, a sensor that looked suspiciously new, as if recently, and perhaps inexpertly, replaced. He ran his thumb over the battery terminals, noting the fine, almost invisible layer of corrosion that could, in the right or wrong circumstances, disrupt the delicate flow of electricity. Cassandra watched him, her initial impatience giving way to a grudging fascination. She was accustomed to mechanics who attack problems with a barrage of diagnostic equipment and technical jargon. Hem's approach was different. It was holistic. He seemed to be trying to understand the car's story, its history, its unique personality, before even attempting a diagnosis. It reminded her, strangely, of her grandfather, a renowned, old-school physician who had always insisted on truly listening to his patients, on observing their subtle, nonverbal cues before ever reaching for his prescription pad. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes, Hem straightened up, a thoughtful frown creasing his already deeply furrowed brow. "Well, miss," he said, his voice a low rumble, "it ain't your integrated control module. I can tell you that much. Leastways, not primarily." Cassandra felt a flicker of hope. You know what's wrong?" Hem didn't answer directly. He shuffled back to his ancient pickup truck and rummaged in the cluttered toolbox that lay, rust-covered and dented, in the truck bed. He returned with a small, worn toothbrush, a can of what looked suspiciously like cola, and a surprisingly delicate-looking multimeter, its casing cracked but its probes clean and sharp. Cassandra stared at the unlikely assortment of tools with a mixture of disbelief and dawning apprehension. A toothbrush? Cola? Was this man a mechanic or some sort of rural shaman about to perform an arcane ritual on her 21st century marvel of engineering? Battery, terminals, Hem grunted, as if sensing her unspoken question. Sometimes, the simplest things are the most overlooked, especially by folks who are looking for complicated, expensive problems. He proceeded, with surprising dexterity for a man whose hands looked as if they'd been carved from old oak, to clean the battery terminals, using the toothbrush and a splash of the cola to remove the almost invisible layer of corrosion. Cassandra watched, mesmerized, as the dull lead of the terminals began to gleam faintly. He then attached the probes of his ancient multimeter, his brow furrowed in concentration as he read the dial. "Oomph," he grunted again. "Charge is a bit low, but she ought to turn over. Unless—" His gaze drifted back to that new-looking sensor, the one with the faint droplet of condensation. "This here part, miss," he said, tapping the sensor with a gnarled finger. "It knew." Cassandra nodded. "Yes. The mechanic in the city. He replaced it last week. Said it was faulty. It cost a fortune." Hem's lips thinned. "Reckon he might have replaced a perfectly good part, miss. And maybe didn't seat this new one quite right. Or maybe he sold you a lemon." He leaned closer, his pale blue eyes examining the sensor with an intensity that made Cassandra feel as if he were looking into its very soul. He then did something that made her gasp. He reached into his overalls pocket and produced a small, tarnished silver locket, the kind a man might carry a picture of his sweetheart in. He opened it, not to reveal a photograph, but a tiny, perfectly folded square of tinfoil. With infinite care, he unfolded the tinfoil and, using the tip of a pocket knife that looked as old as he was, he gently, meticulously wedged a minuscule sliver of the foil into a tiny gap between the sensor and its connector, a gap so small Cassandra hadn't even noticed it was there. "Sometimes, miss," Hem said, his voice a low murmur, "all a machine needs is a proper connection. A bit of encouragement to talk to itself, right?" He then reconnected the battery cable, gave a final, almost affectionate pat to the engine block, and straightened up. "All right, miss," he said, his gaze meeting hers, a faint, almost imperceptible twinkle in his pale blue eyes. "Try her now." Cassandra stared at him, then at the engine, then back at him. This was it. A toothbrush, a can of cola, and a sliver of tinfoil from an old man's locket. It was insane. It was ludicrous. It couldn't possibly work. But there was something in Hem's quiet confidence, in the calm certainty of his gaze, that made her, against all reason, want to believe. She slid into the driver's seat, her hands trembling slightly as she inserted the key into the ignition. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and turned the key. The engine hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, with a smooth, powerful, and utterly astonishing roar, it sprang to life, its sophisticated electronics humming in perfect harmonious accord. Cassandra's eyes flew open. She stared at the dashboard, at the gauges that were all, miraculously, reading normal. She listened to the purr of the engine, a sound she had thought she might never hear again. It was working. The old farmer, with his archaic tools and his even more archaic wisdom, had done it. He had resurrected her dead car with nothing more than a toothbrush, a soft drink, and a piece of tinfoil. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Cassandra Van Deeren, still reeling from the shock of her resurrected sports car, stumbled out of the driver's seat, her legs feeling a little unsteady. The engine idled smoothly, a purring testament to Old Man Hemlock's improbable mechanical wizardry. She stared at the ancient farmer, who was now calmly wiping his hands on a greasy rag he'd produced from the depths of his overalls, his expression as placid and unreadable as the dusty landscape around them. I don't believe it," she stammered, her voice a mixture of awe and utter bewilderment. How did you do that? With a toothbrush and tinfoil." Hem finished wiping his hands and tucked the rag back into his pocket. He regarded her with those pale, knowing eyes. "Like I said, miss," he rumbled, "sometimes it's the simple things. That fancy mechanic of yours in the city, he was probably looking for a big, expensive problem, something that would justify a big, expensive bill. He weren't looking for a loose connection or a bit of corrosion. Too simple, too cheap." He gestured towards her engine. "These newfangled machines, they're all full of computers and sensors. Mighty clever, I suppose. But they still need good, clean electricity to talk to each other. And sometimes they just need a little help making the right connections." Cassandra was still trying to process the sheer, unadulterated improbability of it all. Hours ago, she had been stranded, hopeless, her expensive, sophisticated car a useless piece of metal, her important meeting, her very career, hanging in the balance. And now, thanks to this dusty, unassuming farmer and his almost comically low-tech interventions, she was saved. I don't know how to thank you, mister. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask your name, she said, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Hemlock, he supplied. Folks round here just call me Hem. Mr. Hemlock. Hem, she corrected herself, offering a tentative smile. I'm Cassandra Van Deeren, and I am incredibly grateful. You've performed a miracle. Hem just shrugged, a characteristic gesture of understated dismissal. We're no miracle, miss. Just a bit of common sense. Something that seems to be in short supply these days, especially in the city. He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, then over her gleaming, purring car. You were in a powerful hurry when you passed me earlier. Headed somewhere important, I reckon. Cassandra nodded, the urgency of her situation flooding back now that the immediate crisis had been averted. Yes, very important. A meeting, a presentation, it's in Northwood City. I was already running late, and then this. She gestured helplessly at her car, then at the vast, empty landscape. I'll never make it in time now. Hem squinted at the sun, which was already beginning its slow descent towards the western horizon. Northwood City, not a fair old piece from here. Best part of 3 hours, even in that silver bullet of yours, and that's if you don't hit no traffic near the city limits. Cassandra's heart sank. 3 hours. She had less than 2 before her presentation was due to start. It was hopeless. All this, the improbable rescue, the resurrected car, and she was still going to fail. She felt tears of frustration pricking at her eyelids, and she angrily blinked them away. She would not cry in front of this stoic old farmer. Hem watched her, his expression unreadable. Then, he did something that surprised her almost as much as his tinfoil and cola repair job. He reached into the cab of his ancient pickup and pulled out a battered, oil-stained road atlas, the kind that had been rendered obsolete by GPS and smartphones. He spread it out on the hood of his truck, its pages brittle and faded, and traced a gnarled finger along a network of thin, almost invisible lines. There's another way, miss, he said, his voice a low rumble. Not the main highway. County roads, mostly, bit rough in places, but cuts off a good 40 miles, and ain't likely to be no traffic to speak of, except maybe a tractor or two. He looked up at her, his pale blue eyes holding hers. It's a long shot. You'd have to drive like the devil himself was on your tail. But you might just make it. Cassandra stared at the intricate web of lines on the old map, then at Hem's weathered face. He was offering her a lifeline, a sliver of hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. It was a risk, a gamble. These unfamiliar back roads, in a car that had just been coaxed back to life with tinfoil. But what other choice did she have? You trust me with that route? She asked, a little incredulous. In this car? After what just happened? Hem gave a slow, deliberate nod. Car sound now, miss. That connection, it's solid. Good as new. Maybe better. As for trusting you, he paused, his gaze sweeping over her again, but this time there was a hint of something else in his eyes, something almost approving. You got grit, miss. I saw it in your eyes when you were trying to wail on that engine with that tire iron. A bit misguided, maybe a rare, fleeting smile touched his lips, but grit all the same. And sometimes grit and a good map are all a body needs. He carefully tore the relevant page from the ancient atlas and handed it to her. Keep the sun on your left shoulder till you hit the old Saguaro Creek crossing, then hang a right at the 3 twisted junipers. After that, he proceeded to give her a series of precise, idiosyncratic directions, landmarks that existed only in the memory of old-timers like himself, a collapsed windmill, a rusted-out tractor, a lone, lightning-struck cottonwood tree. It was a map drawn not in ink, but in a lifetime of experience, of intimate knowledge of this harsh, unforgiving land. Cassandra listened intently, tried to commit his words to memory, her earlier despair replaced by a surge of adrenaline, a renewed sense of purpose. This old farmer, this unlikely savior, had not just fixed her car, he had given her a fighting chance. As she folded the precious, tattered map and slid back into the driver's seat of her now purring sports car, she felt a profound, almost overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Hem," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I can't thank you enough. How can I ever repay you?" Hem simply waved a dismissive hand. "No need for repayment, miss. Just drive careful. And maybe slow down a bit once you get where you're going. Sometimes the things you're looking for are in the quiet places you hurry past." With a final, enigmatic nod, he climbed back into his ancient pickup. The engine coughed, sputtered, then with a protesting groan caught. He gave her a brief, almost imperceptible wave, and then, with a rattle and a cloud of blue exhaust smoke, he rumbled off down the dusty county road, leaving Cassandra alone once more, but this time with a map, a running car, and a sliver of improbable hope. The race against time and against the unforgiving landscape had begun. Cassandra Van Deeren drove like a woman possessed. Her silver sports car, now humming with a newfound vitality, devoured the miles of cracked asphalt and dusty back roads. Hem's tattered map spread out on the passenger seat, his idiosyncratic directions echoing in her mind. She pushed the car, and herself, to the limits, her city-honed driving skills surprisingly adaptable to the rough, unpredictable terrain. She navigated by landmarks that seemed to belong to a forgotten era. The collapsed windmill, its blades groaning in the wind like a dying beast. The rusted-out tractor, half swallowed by a field of tumbleweeds. The lone, lightning-struck cottonwood, its skeletal branches stark against the vast, indifferent sky. It was a journey through a landscape that was both alien and strangely, compellingly beautiful. The desolation had a stark, minimalist grandeur, the silence a profound, almost spiritual depth. She found herself noticing things she had never seen before. The subtle hues of the desert wildflowers clinging to life in the arid soil, the intricate patterns of erosion on the ancient rock formations, the vast, breathtaking expanse of the sky, unmarred by city smog or towering skyscrapers. Hem's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes, the things you're looking for are in the quiet places you hurry past. She was still hurrying, of course. The clock was a relentless, unforgiving tyrant. But somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. The panic, the frustration, the soul-crushing despair she had felt earlier had been replaced by a strange, almost exhilarating sense of focus, of purpose, of a primal connection to this harsh, beautiful land and the quiet, resilient people who eked out a living from its unforgiving embrace. She thought of him, of his quiet competence, his unassuming wisdom, his simple, profound act of kindness. He had asked for nothing in return, had expected nothing. He had simply seen someone in need and offered his help, without judgment, without fanfare. It was a kind of integrity, a kind of generosity that she rarely encountered in her own fast-paced, transactional city world. The back roads were rough, demanding all her concentration. Potholes appeared out of nowhere. Gravel patches threatened to send her skidding, and the occasional, startled jackrabbit darted across her path, its eyes wide with a terror that mirrored her own internal anxieties. But she pressed on, fueled by adrenaline, by desperation, and by a growing, almost grudging, respect for the old farmer's knowledge of this hidden, forgotten network of routes. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, she finally saw it. The distant, familiar gleam of the main highway, a ribbon of smooth, multi-laned concrete that represented her return to civilization, her return to the world she knew. She had made it. Against all odds, she had navigated Hem's improbable shortcut and was now, unbelievably, back on track. She glanced at the clock on her dashboard. If she pushed it, if she drove with the same focused intensity she had maintained for the past 2 hours, she just might make her meeting. The thought sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through her. She merged onto the highway, the roar of her engine a triumphant counterpoint to the setting sun. The transition from the quiet desolation of the back roads to the frenetic energy of the highway was jarring. Cars whizzed past, horns blared, the air filled with the familiar cacophony of urban life. But Cassandra found herself strangely changed. The city, which had always represented ambition, success, the relentless pursuit of her goals, now felt a little hollow, a little superficial. She thought of Hem's weathered face, of his quiet dignity, of the simple, profound wisdom in his pale blue eyes. She thought of the tattered map, a testament to a different kind of knowledge, a different way of seeing the world. The important meeting, the career-defining presentation, still loomed large, of course, but no longer felt like the only thing that mattered. Something else had taken root within her, a sense of perspective, a glimmer of understanding that there was a world beyond the boardrooms and the balance sheets, a world of quiet resilience, of simple kindness, of a profound, unassuming connection to the earth and to each other. She arrived at the gleaming, anonymous office tower in Northwood City with minutes to spare, her hair disheveled, her expensive silk blouse stained with dust and perspiration, her designer jeans bearing a suspicious smudge of what looked remarkably like cola. She probably looked like she'd been wrestling a badger, she thought with a wry, internal smile, remembering Mr. Harrison's comment about the legacy billing system from Another Story, Another Life. But as she strode into the lobby, her head held high, her tattered map clutched in her hand like a talisman, she felt a new, unfamiliar sense of confidence, a confidence that had nothing to do with her perfectly rehearsed presentation or her impeccable credentials. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the wilderness, both literal and metaphorical, and had, with a little help from an unexpected source, found her way through. The meeting was a blur. She delivered her presentation with a passion and conviction that surprised even herself. Her ideas, usually so carefully hedged, so meticulously researched, now flowed with a new, uninhibited energy, an energy born of her recent, transformative experience. She spoke of sustainable solutions, of community engagement, of looking beyond the short-term profit margins to the long-term well-being of the planet and its people, concepts that would have sounded naive, almost radical, in her previous, more conventional presentations. But now they felt, right? Authentic. True. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence in the boardroom. Then, the CEO of the company she was pitching to, a notoriously tough, cynical old businessman named Arthur Blackwood, no relation to Garrison, though perhaps a kindred spirit in his initial skepticism, leaned forward, a rare, thoughtful expression on his face. "Miss Van Deeren," he said, his voice a low rumble, "that was refreshing. Unexpected. You've given us a great deal to think about." He didn't say yes, not immediately. But Cassandra knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had made an impression, a profound one. She had spoken her truth, a truth that had been forged in the dust and heat of a forgotten county road, a truth that had been illuminated by the quiet wisdom of an old farmer and his tattered map. The outcome of the meeting, she realized with a sudden, surprising clarity, was almost secondary. Something far more important had happened to her that day. She had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. She had found a different kind of road, a different kind of map, and perhaps, just perhaps, a different kind of self. The days following Cassandra's whirlwind trip and her unexpectedly impactful presentation were a period of quiet reflection for her. The Northwood City project, the one that had seemed so all-consuming, so critical to her career, was still pending, but its outcome no longer held the same life-or-death significance it once had. Her encounter with Old Man Hemlock, the improbable resurrection of her car, the journey through that stark, beautiful, forgotten landscape. It had all conspired to recalibrate her perspective, to shift her priorities in ways she was still struggling to fully comprehend. She found herself haunted by the image of Hem's weathered face, by his quiet dignity, by the simple, profound wisdom he had imparted in so few words. She thought of his tattered map, a relic from a bygone era, yet a more reliable guide, in its own way, than any sophisticated GPS. She thought of his parting words, "Sometimes, the things you're looking for are in the quiet places you hurry past." She had been hurrying past so much, she realized. So focused on the next promotion, the next deal, the next rung on the corporate ladder, that she had failed to see the world around her, the quiet beauty, the hidden connections, the simple, fundamental truths that lay just beyond the glare of her ambition. She tried to find Hemlock again. She called the feed store in the dusty little town he had mentioned, but the proprietor, a taciturn man with a voice like gravel, claimed to know of no one by that name. She even, on a whim, tried to retrace her route using a modern GPS, but the back roads Hem had guided her through seemed to have vanished from the digital landscape, swallowed by the vast, indifferent expanse of the forgotten territory. It was as if Hem, and his improbable knowledge, belonged to a different dimension, a hidden world accessible only to those who were truly lost, truly in need. A week later, she received a call from Arthur Blackwood, the CEO of the company she had pitched to. He was offering her the project. Not just offering it, but offering it with an enthusiasm, a commitment to her refreshing and unexpected vision that stunned her. He spoke of wanting to explore more sustainable, community-focused initiatives, of a desire to shift his company's focus towards a more holistic, long-term approach. It was as if her presentation, born of her transformative experience, had somehow resonated with a part of him that had also been lying dormant, waiting for a catalyst. Cassandra accepted, of course, but her acceptance was different now. It was not driven by a desperate need for validation, for success at any cost. It was driven by a genuine desire to make a difference, to implement the ideas that had taken root within her on that dusty county road. She insisted on including a significant component of rural outreach in the project, a plan to invest in struggling agricultural communities, to support sustainable farming practices, to help revitalize the forgotten corners of the land that had, in a way, saved her. Arthur Blackwood, to her surprise, readily agreed. He seemed changed, more thoughtful, more human. As Cassandra began to work on the Northwood project, she found herself frequently thinking of him. She couldn't shake the feeling that she owed him a debt, a profound one, that went far beyond a simple thank you for fixing her car. He had given her more than just a running engine and a tattered map. He had given her a new way of seeing, a new way of being. She decided to do something a little unconventional, something her old hyper-ambitious self would have scoffed at as a waste of time and resources. She used a portion of her first project advance to set up a small, anonymous fund dedicated to providing emergency roadside assistance and mechanical support to farmers and residents in remote, underserved rural areas, the kind of places where a broken-down vehicle wasn't just an inconvenience, but a potential disaster. She called it Hemlock's Helpers, a quiet tribute to the old man whose simple act of kindness had so profoundly changed her life. She never saw him again. Perhaps he was, as she sometimes suspected, a figment of her heat-stroked, desperate imagination, a kind of rural spirit guide conjured up by her subconscious. Or perhaps he was simply a quiet, unassuming man who had done a good deed and then faded back into the anonymity of his harsh, beautiful landscape, expecting nothing in return. But his impact on Cassandra Van Deeren was undeniable and enduring. She became a different kind of executive, a different kind of leader. She was still ambitious, still driven, still brilliant. But her ambition was now tempered with empathy, her drive infused with a sense of purpose that went beyond profit margins and market shares. She learned to listen, truly listen, not just to the data, but to the stories, to the silences, to the quiet whispers of human need and human potential. She learned the value of slowing down, of looking beyond the obvious, of finding the hidden connections, the forgotten pathways. And she never forgot the lessons of the tattered map and the quiet, unassuming wisdom of the old farmer who had shown her that sometimes the most profound journeys begin when you are utterly, completely lost. That sometimes the greatest clarity comes not from a sophisticated GPS, but from the simple, time-honored landmarks of human kindness, resilience, and a deep, abiding connection to the earth beneath our feet. It is a reminder to us all that even in our most desperate moments, when we feel stranded, broken down, lost in the wilderness of our own lives, help can come from the most unexpected of sources. And sometimes the greatest treasures are found not at the end of the highway, but on the dusty, forgotten back roads, in the quiet places we too often hurry past. If you find yourself on such a road, take a moment. Listen, look, you might be surprised by what and who you discover. And you might just find a map to a destination you never even knew you were searching for. The Hemlock's Helpers initiative, though started with modest, anonymous funding from Cassandra, began to take on a life of its own. Word spread through the sparsely populated rural counties. Tales of an almost mythical network of volunteer mechanics and resourceful individuals who would appear, as if by magic, when a farmer's tractor broke down miles from anywhere, or an elderly resident's ancient car refused to start on a freezing winter morning. These helpers, often local mechanics, retired farmers with a knack for engines, or even resourceful young people from nearby towns, embodied Hem's spirit of quiet competence and unassuming generosity. They didn't advertise. Their services were spread through word of mouth, through a network of trust built on shared hardship and mutual reliance. They'd fix engines with ingenuity and whatever parts were at hand, often refusing payment, content with a cup of coffee, a heartfelt thank you, or perhaps a share of a farmer's meager harvest. Cassandra, through a discreet intermediary, a kind-hearted rural lawyer she had met during her project outreach, continued to quietly support the initiative, ensuring it had the basic resources it needed: a fund for essential parts, a communication network, often relying on old CB radios and community bulletin boards in areas where cell service was a distant dream, and a way to connect those in need with those who could help. She never sought recognition for her role. It was her private tribute, her way of keeping Hem's spirit alive. The Northwood City Project, under Cassandra's leadership, became a model of sustainable development and community engagement. It wasn't just about building new infrastructure. It was about revitalizing the old, about investing in local businesses, about creating opportunities for the very communities that the relentless march of urban progress had left behind. She championed programs that supported small family farms, that promoted water conservation in arid regions, that helped rural communities develop local, sustainable industries. Her work was not always easy. She faced skepticism from her corporate colleagues, resistance from entrenched interests, the sheer, daunting scale of the problems she was trying to address. But the memory of Hem, of his quiet resilience, his practical wisdom, his unwavering belief in the power of simple, direct action, sustained her. She learned to navigate the complex world of corporate politics with a new, quiet strength. Her arguments rooted not in abstract theories, but in the tangible realities of the people and places she was trying to serve. She discovered she had a talent for bridging divides, for finding common ground between the slick, fast-paced world of urban finance and the slower, more deliberate rhythms of rural life. Arthur Blackwood, her initially skeptical CEO, became her staunchest ally. He saw in Cassandra not just a brilliant executive, but a leader with a rare and precious combination of vision, pragmatism, and genuine compassion. He gave her the autonomy she needed, backed her unconventional initiatives, and often, in private moments of reflection, found himself wondering about the dusty, forgotten corner of the world that had so profoundly transformed this once typical city girl. He even, on one occasion, quietly diverted a significant portion of his own annual bonus to Hemlock's Helpers, his only instruction to the intermediary being, make sure it gets where it's needed most. No fuss, no fanfare. The initiative, thus fortified, expanded its reach, its network of quiet helpers growing, its impact deepening. Stories began to emerge of families saved from foreclosure because a timely tractor repair allowed them to get their crops to market, of isolated seniors reconnected with their communities because their only vehicle was kept running, of young people in forgotten towns finding purpose and skills by volunteering as apprentice helpers. These were small victories, unheralded in the grand scheme of global finance or technological disruption, but they were real, tangible, life-altering. They were the quiet, steady work of hope, of resilience, of human connection, a legacy worthy of the old farmer who had inspired it all. Cassandra never did find Hemlock again, at least not in person. But she found him in the faces of the grateful farmers her initiative helped, in the quiet dignity of the rural communities she worked with, in the resilient beauty of the landscapes she fought to protect. She found him in the tattered map she kept framed on her office wall, a constant reminder of the journey that had changed her life. A reminder that true direction often comes not from the loudest voices or the most sophisticated technologies, but from the quiet wisdom of those who know the land, who understand its secrets, who live in harmony with its harsh, beautiful, and enduring truths. Her life, once a relentless pursuit of a narrowly defined success, had become a testament to a different kind of ambition, an ambition to connect, to heal, to serve, to leave the world, in her own quiet, unassuming way, a little better than she had found it. And in that, Cassandra Van Deeren, the city girl who had been saved by a farmer's kindness, discovered a richness, a fulfillment that no amount of corporate triumph could ever have provided. The most important meetings, she learned, often happen on dusty, forgotten roads, and the most valuable lessons are taught not in boardrooms, but by those who have learned to listen to the silent language of the earth and to the quiet, resilient beating of the human heart.